Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's ABF Journal live stream, The Evolving Art of Business Development, sponsored by Gordon Brothers. Again, thank you all for joining. I do really appreciate it. Before we get into the panel that we have for you lined up today, I want to just go over a few housekeeping items. First, we encourage you all to interact with the panel as much as you'd like and to interact with one another. You can do so in one of two ways. You can either ask questions to the panel directly by using the Q&A function on your screen, or you can use the chat function to message panelists and fellow attendees. We'll be monitoring both channels throughout the event, so make sure to get your questions in, and hopefully we'll have time at the end for some Q&A. Secondly, near the end of the program, I will be dropping a link to the survey in the chat. Please take a few minutes to fill it out so you can let us know how we're doing and what we can do to improve for the next one. Lastly, for anyone that registered, we will be sending out a recording of the live stream in the next couple of days, along with a link to that survey. So if you don't have time to do it today, that's totally fine. You can get to it when we send it out then. That's all for me for right now. I'm going to hand it off to our moderator, Howard Brownstein. Take it away, Howard.
Thank you, Phil, and hello, everyone. I'm Howard Brownstein, and I welcome you to the ABF Journal's live stream program, The Evolving Art of Business Development. We have a great program for you today. Let me briefly introduce myself, and then I'll introduce our panelists. So I am president of the Brownstein Corporation. We are a turnaround and crisis management firm. We work all over the country and in virtually every industry. And we, in addition to helping companies in trouble, we also run sale processes, refinancings, provide fiduciary services. And alongside all of that, I serve as an independent corporate board member for public and private companies. I'd like to then introduce Elena Goynatsky. She is Senior Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at Gerber Finance. Elena is responsible for originating, analyzing, and structuring a wide variety of transactions. Elena's extensive experience in marketing and credit provides her with a unique perspective, allowing her to meet clients' needs. Prior to joining Gerber Finance in 2008, she worked at Wells Fargo and Bank Leumi. We also have Barry Kastner with us today. Barry is Executive Vice President and Senior Managing Director of Marco Financial, a Miami and New York-based 2020 startup specialty lender serving SMEs in North America, Latin America, and Europe. Barry is a seasoned professional with more than 40 years of experience in asset-based lending, commercial banking, trade finance, and factoring. His experience includes senior management positions at Vivi Financial Services, Sienna Lending Group, TD Bank, and Wachovia Capital Finance, and its predecessor, Congress Financial, where he served as Chief Operating Officer. Last but not least is Keith Moellering. Keith is a Senior Vice President and Mid-Atlantic Regional Sales Manager for PNC Business Credit. In this role, Keith manages a team of business development officers responsible for originating, structuring, underwriting, and negotiating senior debt opportunities. Previously, Keith spent 10 years as a business development officer in PNC's Mid-Atlantic region. During this time, he originated and closed nearly 100 new transactions, totaling more than $2 billion in new lending commitments. So let's begin by talking about business and development efforts during this unprecedented COVID-19 crisis. Keith, why don't you start us off, please?
Thank you, Howard. Let me first say how happy I am to be here on this panel today. So thank you for having me. You know, I think many of the things that me and my team did during COVID in an effort to really continue marketing PNC's middle market loan products will not be novel or kind of new to anybody on this call. We did a lot of the things I'm sure most of you are doing, which was, you know, pivoting to remote and digital outreach. So we relied heavily on the technologies like Zoom and Skype and Microsoft Teams, you know, doing all of the virtual coffees, virtual lunches, happy hours, et cetera. And we continue to operate like that today. But we also use this technology, as I'm sure many of you do, to facilitate calls with our prospects, to participate in management meetings, participate in bank meetings, to conduct our diligence during the underwriting process. So we're leveraging it for both marketing and closing purposes. All in all, I think everyone has said this, but the transition has been fairly smoother than I think any of us thought, and we've been able to accomplish a lot remotely that a year ago we would have said, how are we going to do this? So that's been kind of interesting, but really the most interesting thing to me in the transition has been, at least for us at PNC, is really about the ability to get more people into the room with our prospects. And what I mean by that is the technology itself really afforded us the ability to engage our executive leadership team with our customers and our borrowers more frequently and earlier in the process. In pre-COVID times, we may not introduce our executive team until very late in the process, or perhaps even after the closing. And with remote engagement and virtual meetings, we've been able to really leverage our executives and get them in front of the customers earlier, which they've appreciated. And it just gives us a way to give access to the decision makers at PNC across the organization. I think, clients really responded well to that and like that. I don't know if others have been doing that or not, but it seems to have been well received at PNC. And I think a differentiator for us in terms of getting folks in front of people. So that was kind of one thing. The second thing I would note about the remote marketing effort and business development was, and again, this won't be probably new news, but very, very much more effective in kind of maintaining and nurturing existing relationships, and much more difficult really to kind of grow a greenfield new relationship in a virtual environment. Not impossible, of course, but just a little more difficult. And, obviously it makes sense. I mean, people kind of gravitate towards the relationships which they already have, and maybe have already been proven, whether in a prior transaction or some other business dealing. So you kind of lean back, everybody kind of leaned on those relationships, and it was harder and continues to be harder to make, new connections, remotely. Now, going back to the summer of 2020, I would just add a couple of things that would, from a marketing perspective, we did see demand in certain industries. I mean, clearly in March and April, there was a gap, but by the summer months, we saw some opportunity in certain industries. I'll just mention a few. One was the retail space. There were a lot of retailers, very strong balance sheet that came to market and really looking for a transition to ABL, with the strategy that they needed to really maximize their credit facility, get as long of a runway as possible, just to deal with the unknown timing aspects of the crisis. And so we found some opportunity there and marketed accordingly. Similarly, in the building product space, we saw similar demand. I'm sure everyone's been renovating and home improvements, and certainly been reading about, the growth in that industry. So that's been a bright spot and somewhere where, we've kind of targeted our efforts. And then lastly, in the technology space has been a real bright spot for us. And B2B, SaaS-based technology products, software products. There's been tremendous demand as companies continue to rely ever more heavily, right, during COVID on these technology products to run the business more efficiently. So there were some bright spots, where we found opportunity. And then lastly, I should mention, and I know we're going to touch on this in more detail, but the PPP program was clearly a focus of the banks and took up a great deal of oxygen in 2020. I do think it turned out to be really a tremendous aid to borrowers. Likely it was key for many in averting significant restructuring and or bankruptcy, especially in the lower middle market, where you see weaker balance sheets, less able to absorb external shocks like COVID. So I think it was a great success. I feel many banks use the PPP program not only to support their existing borrowers, but also as a marketing tool to attract new customers.
aside from, sort of more Zoom calls and less in-person visits, is there anything else that you and your team have particularly been doing differently, and anything you might keep doing even when things normalize?
Well, I think there's kind of unique pockets, right? And everybody has their own style on the business development side, and certainly their own relationships. I know, some folks have been getting together outdoors and, meeting and even just kind of walking or exercising together, that kind of thing. And maybe some of that will keep going after COVID. I don't know. But nothing really, I don't think anything out of the ordinary that probably other folks aren't already doing.
Okay. And what about your referral sources? Have you seen any changes among them?
I have not. No, I mean, I think, I think everybody's dealing with the same environment, right? So we're all kind of grappling along together. And, maybe only just that I mentioned, the referral sources that are already developed tend to be the ones that have been, more active in the past year. Because they've had a successful track record with us and kind of know how we execute. So that's been useful.
Of the three lenders on the program, you're the one who's a regulated bank. We've heard that the regulators haven't given a whole lot of guidance to lenders in navigating through this. I don't know if that's a fair statement, but do you feel any either wind in your face or wind at your back from regulators?
Howard, that's not an area where I have any visibility. I wouldn't want to comment on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the back end, we've seen a lot of lenders sort of extending, amending, pretending, as we like to say, not a lot of foreclosures. And I'm just wondering if that's all showing up on the front end.
Well, I think in general, you can look at the earnings reports that are coming out, and banks are releasing their reserves because, we took the industry took a very conservative view a year ago, and it turns out over reserved. So you're seeing that come out now. But as I mentioned with the PPP program, I think across the industry, it really was a success in filling the gap for a lot of these borrowers. And I know, and maybe, you could comment in my conversations with, other restructuring firms and whatnot, there was an expectation in Q3 and Q4 of last year, there would be tons of work, and it turned out there wasn't, so I think it's reflective of the success of PPP, and you see it now in the earnings reports coming out of the banks.
Let me ask first Elena and then Barry to add any comments they might like to add. Elena? You have to unmute. Here you go.
Thank you. First, thank you very much, Keith. We are totally on the same boat. I think we all are. We have the same struggle, the same success. But I want to add that I found last year and the whole process of reconnecting with referral sources being a little bit more humanizing, because before that, we all were uptight on the golf course or networking event with a glass of wine and talking business. Now having Zoom, you have dogs barking, kids interrupting. Before this beautiful background came out, we figured out that beautiful background. We had art on the walls and sports memorabilia, and you can reconnect in so many different ways to the same people who you've known for years, but didn't have that reconnection. So I feel that it became much more humanizing, and that's probably a silver lining we can bring from the COVID to next year.
Thanks. Barry, like to add anything?
Yeah, I certainly agree with Keith, and was going to make the same comment that Elena just brought up, because there is a real human aspect to this. And thank goodness we have this technology today, because if this pandemic had hit 10, 15, 20 years ago, I mean, things would have been quite different. But yeah, we all had something in common. When we met new borrowers, new prospects, we all asked about their safety. We were concerned with each other. And, that's something that I think didn't exist for a while in our industry. The other thing I would add from a technology point of view is, Marco is a COVID baby. We were born in 2020 during the COVID crisis. So many of us didn't even get to meet each other in person. I didn't meet my CEO till I was on board for 6 months. So we use technology as a tool, not only to reach out to referral sources and borrowers, but literally to build our management team and our business. Couldn't have done it without it. Now, many of us worked together at a previous institution, but even so, you know, it's nice to be able to see people in person once again. And you know, we're just about around the corner to be able to do that. We actually have a new office space, so life will get back to normal, but it has been an interesting year for sure.
Well, great. Well, let's maybe turn to the next part of our presentation about evaluating, winning, and closing deals. I'm going to call on Barry to lead off that presentation. And when I was introducing him and going through his senior roles over the years, I'm realizing how old I must be because I knew you at all of those. And I've been a fan all those years. So take it away, Barry.
Yeah, you and I have been around for a long time. We've got some good stories. I think we had the world's longest and fanciest lunch in history many years ago. But, you know, those of us who've been around the industry for a while, unfortunately, we've seen the industry have to react to some major disruptions. For example, 9/11, the financial crisis, major natural disasters. Howard, you and I probably remember the sinking of the Titanic. We don't go back that far, but close. But the pandemic is certainly something no one could have predicted, and it undoubtedly, you know, had the most significant impact on our business and business in general that I've seen in my career. But in each case, you know, our reaction as an industry, you know, first we catch our breath, we take care of our people. Can you see me okay? Because I'm seeing you, Howard.
Sure.
Okay, good. But yeah, we catch our breath, we take care of our people, but then, you know, it's only natural that our first business reaction is to kind of slow down the new business machine and concentrate on our existing portfolios, which is the prudent thing to do in a crisis. And in each case, and certainly in 2020, most lenders, you know, had to do that. Now, the PPE program we talked about a little bit before, that helped a lot of our borrowers and took some pressure off of the lenders. And in each case, you know, a recovery eventually brought back credit appetites for new business, and sometimes even more aggressive credit appetites in order to compete. And it sometimes feels like we flipped the switch and we went from, you know, a conservative credit appetite to an aggressive appetite industry-wise. Now, because Marco is a COVID baby that we began last year, we didn't have a portfolio to worry about. So that kind of enabled us to be more aggressive, and we've been fortunate to book quite a bit of business this year and much more than we had planned for. But what I'm seeing now is the rest of the market is catching up, and lenders have become more aggressive, and I think that will continue. The other thing I notice is we all seem to be hiring. We have a large hiring effort underway. We're hiring across the board: business development, underwriting, credit, marketing, technology, across the board. We'll be doubling our staff within the next 30 to 60 days. And frankly, we've had literally hundreds of applications, and my head is spinning just from all the interviewing I've been doing. But, you know, we're expecting a strong recovery, and like most other lenders, we're staffing up for it. If, you know, 2020 was not the best year if you're a BDO. I mean, let's be frank. But I do believe that 2021 and going into 2022 will be a BDO's market, you know, both in terms of sourcing new business and in terms of finding the right shop for many people. I'm just seeing a lot of BDOs moving in the market and a lot of opportunities available in the market. And this obviously comes after some pretty drastic COVID layoffs last year. But to kind of state the obvious, it's important to a BDO's success to align with the right credit culture. Nothing can ruin a BDO's reputation or brand more than a weak credit appetite, or more than that, failure to follow up and follow through on a proposal. Remember, we serve two masters in the business development area. We've got to win the deal, we've got to get the proposal signed, but then we've also got to get it approved by our credit committees. So there's a lot of balance involved. But bottom line, I strongly believe it's going to be good to be a BDO in 2021. In terms of industries, Keith touched on it. I'll just add one or two more. Food industry has been a constant in the ABL factoring commercial finance area, processors, distributors, exporters. So we continue to see a lot in the food business. Certainly the grocery stores are busy, not so much restaurants and not so much bars. Alcohol distributors are busy. It's been a banner year for drinking, apparently. And as Keith mentioned, furniture, home improvements, leisure apparel, I'll point out, not so much dress suits anymore. Airline industry, I think, is going to be bouncing back. I was in a plane this weekend and it was packed. Airports were packed. Probably cars as well. I was in a car showroom this week and it was mob. So I think we're going to see some resurgence on those industries that got hit pretty hard.
Barry, first of all, I want to remind all of our attendees, please feel free to post any questions you may have in the Q&A function or in the chat function, whichever you like. So here's a question. Do you imagine we'll see any outsourcing of functions, particularly on the front end, underwriting, et cetera?
I think that's going to change much, Howard. I think, right now, everybody's doing most of their due diligence and underwriting in-house. We're not sending field auditors out. We're doing in-house due diligence. I think once people get through this, vaccinated, and the world gets back to normal, there won't be outsourcing as much. I think we'll continue with the model that has always worked for us, before this massive disruption.
And in terms of finding new customers, not just trying to increase business with old ones, using technology to do that, is that a challenge?
That's a challenge, and it's something that we are in particular working on. And, we want to be technology at the forefront of technology. But nothing can replace, in my view, relationships. And I've got to agree with what Keith said before, especially during this pandemic, we rely on trusted relationships that we've worked with before. And I think they rely on us individually and institutionally to get transactions done for them. But yes, we are using technology, and we're using a little bit more outbound calling, especially in our Latin America practice. One of our differentiators is that we finance Latin American, Mexican businesses that export into the US. And we are using technology and databases for both identifying and for creditworthiness on the debtor end.
Yeah, I would echo that. By the way, we're doing a lot of the same stuff. I know there was a question about how technology to find new clients. I mean, we're looking at the industries where the demand is, right, and trying to use technology to identify who the right folks are. But the marketing effort tends to be very similar. Once you've kind of done the homework, the marketing effort tends to be very similar to what it was. At least for us, kind of pre-COVID, we're reaching out, we're calling, we're trying to get in front of them, whether it's by phone or email or by some sort of virtual meeting to get the conversation going. That where the technology may come in more than in the past is using resources like LinkedIn or other databases that we have access to more easily kind of drill down into those target areas where we want to spend our time. And then I'll just touch on the outsourcing question real quick as well. For us at least, we've always operated. We've largely outsourced our field exam, our appraisals, our background checks, third party, quality of earning work when we require it. So nothing's changed in that regard. Those functions will continue to be outsourced. The underwriting function is key to us, and that'll stay in-house as we want to control that. But so there hasn't really been any change on that front, with at least with respect to what I've seen.
Elena, would you like to add any comments?
Yeah, I just want to add that to Barry's comment that he mentioned industry that did well and didn't do well. I just want to say that the industry that had e-commerce platform or were able to quickly develop e-commerce platform, and companies with a strong management who were able to do that did really well, because this ability to change, ability to move along with the situation, and those were the companies who did well in the last year. And the same for us. I'm a big believer, like Barry, I'm old school. I'm a big believer in personal relationship and face-to-face meeting. But I find out that there is no other way. We need to look for something different. We need to look for new sources of deals and for new sources of relationships. So I've been very successful in LinkedIn this year. I spend a lot of time in LinkedIn and develop my way to find the new referral sources. And again, we are not limited to geography anymore. It doesn't have to be somebody from New York or Long Island or New Jersey. So you can find a deal now in another part of the country and connect with that person the same way as you can connect to your neighbor from next town in New Jersey. So that was very good. And another one is the trade shows. Trade show, we don't walk trade shows anymore. I never liked walking trade shows, and that's why that segment for me was always closed, because I personally was never big fan of walking trade shows. But now when you have all virtuals, you can get enough information about the participants, about people, and about decision maker while just sitting in front of your computer. And you can reach out to those people virtually instead of meeting them, and they don't have a time during the trade show and all they want to sell their product, not to talk to the lender. So there are other new ways to develop a new business, to meet new people, but of course, keeping the relationship that you developed before pre-COVID is extremely important, because those people who have you on their A list, new one, you still start from a C list, maybe you move in a B list, and it takes time until you start being on the top of their mind.
Yeah, and the good news is some of this will survive the pandemic. When this is, all forgotten and past, some of these things that we've learned will be tools that we can use in the future. So there is a little bit of good news.
Are any of you beginning to get more in-person meetings with prospective borrowers?
Yeah.
All
Absolutely.
Of you?
I mean, now that, the world is opening up a little bit, and that, so many people are vaccinated and not afraid to go out. I had my first business lunch, last month. I hadn't had one in almost all of 2020. Restaurants are packed, down here in Florida, and business is starting to get back to normal. So face-to-face, gradually, it's not going to happen overnight, but gradually, I think it's as the world gets a little safer. Most of us are still, being as cautious as we can, but I'm doing more face-to-face. I don't know about my colleagues here.
Me too.
Yeah, we are. We're doing a little more, and I think we were talking beforehand. I mean, you see everybody kind of putting their toe in the water with some of the golf networking and things like that. And then, it's translating into lunches and meetings. So it's coming back. We're starting to do some, we're with the sporting venues are reopening, and we're starting to host some clients and prospects in those venues. And, so I think, by look like midsummer, maybe sooner, things should be blowing and going.
I'm not sure I want to hear the answer to this question that someone posed. Do you think intermediaries will be replaced by technology?
Never, Howard, never.
Never.
Now, there's such a personal touch to this business. Maybe access to intermediaries, maybe aided by technology, but replaced. I certainly hope BDOs are never replaced by technology. That can happen too.
Sure.
Well, I feel like, especially in the commercial finance end of the business and the asset-based lending end of the business, these are not cookie cutter opportunities or transactions that can be easily, reduced down to some form of an algorithm and run through a automated underwriting process. So I just don't see it happening in the near term.
To what extent do you use LinkedIn, and are there any other platforms that you use? Who wants to take that one first? Anybody want to comment?
Elena, go ahead.
Yes, I started using it. I'd never been active on LinkedIn before. I felt like I have enough referral sources before pandemic to have to fill my pipeline and to have enough deal flow. But then when 2020 happened and you're forced to look for another way to develop business and to meet the new people, LinkedIn came very, very helpful. And it's a place so you can reach to the person individually, you can develop that sort of relationship. And I found it very helpful. Yeah.
Talking about the private equity space, which drives a lot of demand, we've been finding that there's too much money out there and not enough deals. And so everybody's a little starved for deal flow and are going down market in terms of risk or size or outside the industry parameters that they had set. What are you finding, particularly as it affects lenders? Who wants to take that one first? Just give me a hand.
I'll jump in. I would say that, look, the credit appetite right now across the industry, whether it's banks or non-banks or commercial finance, et cetera, it's very strong, right? Like you said, there's a lot of dollars chasing very few assets. And if it's a quality asset, then, it's even worse. So I don't know where that's going to end, but it certainly is something we're seeing in the marketplace, and there's pressure around, all of the, negotiable deal points.
Yeah, and on the smaller side, because obviously, Keith is seeing bigger deals. On the smaller side, I'm seeing the private equity groups for refinancing, generally refinancing of deals that their banks either want out of or just are not, meeting the expectations of a demanding private equity group. So we're seeing it more on the refi side than we are on the, the new acquisition side.
We are probably in between, because generally speaking, we are seeing very slow conversion from the prospect to deal. And exception probably is deal sponsored by private equities. And private equity, we see private equity being very active with a lot of money and very quick compared to another way of closing business or converting deals.
So Elena, looking ahead beyond the pandemic, which we're all eager to do, how do you think business will get developed when we can legitimately say this is behind us?
I think it will be kind of hybrid. I think that in the time of large networking events and big group of people in a huge venues are not going to happen in the nearest future. It will be replaced by smaller, more intimate, more close, and networking events. That's how I see the network will be working. Face-to-face, of course, will stay in place, and because people, as I said, nothing can replace a personal relationship and face-to-face meeting. But we will rely a lot on technology, and because technology allows us to reach a broader audience with no geographical limitation. And we can have a breakfast in New York, lunch in Los Angeles, and dinner with Barry in Florida, all by sitting at the same place in my house in Brooklyn. So it's so that's one thing that technology brings, and technology helps. And I think at the end it will be very personal. It will be personal choice. It will be individual choice and the company policy. what they decided to do. I'm answering your third question, or it was like a question between the questions?
Yeah, we're on that third topic we had mentioned about looking to the future.
I see. And I see that speaking about my company, and we'll probably be back in the office in September, but it will be a couple days a week, and it will be those days, at least for the end of the year. And those days will be dedicated to collaborative work, for credit meeting, for group discussion, for some teamwork. And other days when you can like speak on the phone or sit in front of your computer all day, for that you don't need to, for that you don't need to go to the office and spend your time in the office. So that you perfectly can do from home. So it will be some kind of hybrid, considering people's needs, people's choice, commute, family situation. And I think at the end, we think about last year. It's been a lot of challenges. It's been a very difficult year for many of us, especially for those who are in new business. But there is a silver lining. I think all we can learn from last year and bring it to next year. We will be working smartly. We'll be working more efficiently. We will rely on technology. We will rely on our referrals. And we've been on the same boat last year, and hopefully we'll be in the same boat to success next year.
Yeah, Howard, I would just say a couple of things on that, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I agree that there'll be a hybrid, and there'll be some sort of new equilibrium, TBD, right? But I think it's important that, and Elena said this, I mean, the face-to-face meeting is still going to be very important. But I think what'll be different about it is kind of when that happens in the process, and whether or not, now that I think at least people have kind of found, a real a sense of value of their personal time. And now you have this interplay between your personal time and your work time, and how that's going to change. And so, your willingness to go to hop on a plane and go to a management meeting on a deal you may or may not be part of, I think that's going to be different, right? But certainly when there's business to be had, I think people are going to want to get out there and they're going to want to do face-to-face. But I just think people are going to be more mindful of how they spend their time. Now that we've kind of been through this last year and put a lot more value on that.
Yeah, and another thought, again, being a COVID baby and building a new business, we are able to build our business by advertising that we're seeking remote people, which means I can hire a business development person in the West Coast or in the Midwest, even if we don't have, bricks and mortar there. So it expands our capabilities to really build the right team. And the remote worker is going to be something that I think continues to be, a part of our industry. I think that will be an overhang. But in general, look, I think history has shown that we have kind of short memories. And when we get comfortable back with our old routines, I think of, as others have said, I think some of the old routines will survive. But some of the new technologies, some of the new accessibilities, and some of the new benefits of not having to get on a plane to, go to some of these conferences, I think they will endure.
When it comes time to the moment of booking the deal, if nobody has in the organization, in the lending organization, has ever met the borrower face-to-face, is that an obstacle?
Not anymore, because you need that person. You can't say you didn't meet the person if you spend even probably more time on Zoom with that person than if you had a 2 hours or 1 hour meeting and quick walk over the office and warehouse. You may speak, as Keith mentioned, you can bring your senior management to the meeting. You can meet their senior management. So it's more time, actually, it's a more time spent with the prospect. And I think your prospect better this way now than even one short meeting face-to-face in all times. Unless other people think otherwise, but I feel
I agree with that. And I think, but the other diligence items that, we typically run at a regulated bank, I mean, in terms of the, the background checks and whatnot, I mean, there's been probably heavier reliance on that. And, I mean, there's been, just kind of informal recommendations and things like that about who you're doing business with.
I'll tell you what I do miss, though. I do miss walking through a plant, walking through a warehouse, and kind of, touching the collateral, so to speak. It's been a long time, obviously, since we were able to do that. But other than that, I agree with my colleagues here. It does feel like it's face to face when you spend this much time Zooming and having the meetings, and it's making the best out of a not so good situation.
Well, our program today is not about what happens on the back end when maybe you have to do a extension or waiver or forbearance agreement, but I think that could be the subject of another program and how COVID and technology has affected all of that. Let me see if we have any more questions. I guess, you may have touched on this, but let's ask it anyway. In terms of just overall approach to risk and doing everything remotely, how does that feel from a management point of view? Who wants to address that one?
I'll jump in, and it's a bit scary. It's again making the best out of a bad situation. It's the only way we can do business. But I'm old school too, and I like kicking the tires and sitting face to face. But we are doing the best we can. Technology is helping us. We're digging, deeply into the collateral and into all the various issues of any new deal. Howard, people like yourselves are helping us out, by bringing the right prospects to us and by bringing the materials that we need and advising the prospects. So, it's worked out fine. And look, the good news for us is because we're new, thank God we haven't had any, bad situations yet, but they'll be there. We'll need guys like you down the road to help us out of some tricky situations, but so far, so good.
You have my number.
I'd just clarify one point. I just would say that, the window of time where we weren't meeting clients at all kind of before funding a new deal was actually a very short window. I mean, and I don't know, maybe a couple dozen clients came into the organization that way, but I think now we are getting in front of them kind of in advance, in addition to the remote activities that we're doing. So I think that window is kind of closed on, no face-to-face interaction. And the add-on question there about, if a deal blows up that where there wasn't a meeting. Look, I would just say, I mean, and I don't know that we've had one of those yet, but I think that our kind of postmortem process would be, the same as always, where we would, be doing an internal kind of X-ray of how we, how we handled the deal and what, if anything, that we may have missed, right? And, I mean, there's a number of reasons why a deal could go badly, and it may or may not be related to obviously something that, we did on the front end or missed on the front end. But I think our process would be the same in terms of performing that postmortem and just trying to avoid doing it again in the future.
So I'm going to ask each of you in a minute for just any final parting comment. I want to call all of our attendees' attention that in the chat box, there is a link to a survey, and we encourage you all to please click on that link and fill out the survey before you leave us today. So let me ask each of you just to give us some parting words of wisdom. Keith, why don't you go first?
Thanks. Hang in there, it's almost over. The new normal will be whatever we want to make it. And I think we've proved that we can all be very successful and productive, and then still, find other hobbies and spend time with our families. So that's a good thing.
Barry?
Well, what I would add is, we've been here before. We've been through, some pretty unusual and unfortunate circumstances. We've always bounced back. as an industry. And I have absolutely no doubt we will bounce back quickly, fully, and better than before. And I guarantee that this will be a BDO's year.
Elena?
I would love to stop at Barry's comments. I like it so much. It's so optimistic. I think it was a difficult year. I think next year will be much easier for us. We learn a lot, we adapt a lot, we changed a lot, and hopefully we'll bring to the next years all those silver linings and good things that we learned in last year, and we'll be very successful.
Very good. Well, I think we're about at the end of our program, so I'm going to turn things back to Phil Neiffer of ABF Journal.
Thanks so much, Howard, and thank you, Elena, Barry, and Keith for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank everyone who came in and attended today. Thank you so much. We couldn't do this without all of you. That's it for now. Thank you, Howard, for mentioning the link in the survey. This is going to close out pretty soon. So if you didn't get a chance to get that, like I mentioned at the top of the program, you will get an email with the recording of this and that. But if you have any other feedback, you can always reach out to me in any way. But that's it for today. Have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thank you. Great to see everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.